Corin turned away from him, gazing out at the stars once more. The same stars that had once held so much promise now felt cold and distant. He could see the human ships in the sky, massive and intimidating, their forms hanging like predators waiting to strike. He could hear the hum of their machines, feel the oppressive weight of their presence in every corner of his world. The Kyrex had become a colony, a resource, a cog in the wheel of humanity's expansion. But were they so weak now that they could never escape that fate? The rebellion had already begun, even if Corin was not yet ready to fully embrace it. He had a duty to his people, to his heritage. Could he really stand by and let the Kyrex vanish into the cold, mechanical shadow of human dominance? Or was there a way to fight for both survival and their identity? It was that question that would haunt him in the days to come as the rebellion began to grow stronger. The underground network of Kyrex who resisted humanity's control was gaining momentum, their plans growing bolder. More and more voices joined the cause, all asking the same question. What had their survival really cost them? The humans had given them life, but at what price? The Kyrex were being slowly swallowed, consumed by the very thing that had saved them. But in that consumption, they had begun to see an opportunity. If they could fight back, if they could push the humans away, perhaps they could reclaim what they had lost. Perhaps they could save their people from becoming nothing more than an extension of humanity's reach. Corin stood at the precipice, torn between the choices laid before him. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. Could he lead his people into battle? Could he guide them into a future where they might be free and alive? Or was it already too late? The signal arrived unexpectedly, a cry that reverberated across the cold, silent expanse of space. It wasn't a simple message. It was a plea, a desperate call for help that traveled across the galaxy, reaching humanity's farthest outposts. The voice was unfamiliar, filled with fear, desperation, and something that made the hair on the back of the neck stand up. Urgency. A civilization was dying, a sun was collapsing, and their last hope was a species they had never encountered before: humans. The message was clear, pleading, and direct. We need your help. Our world is dying. Our sun is burning out. Please, we beg you, save us. No one knew where the message had come from. No one understood who sent it, but it was unmistakable. Whoever was out there, they needed help. Desperation echoed in the signal, and for a moment, all that humanity could do was listen. The transmission was picked up by an isolated communications outpost on the edge of human-controlled space. At first, the response was confusion. Who was sending this, and why? The transmission had no origin point, no identifiable coordinates. It seemed to come from nowhere, from the deepest, most uncharted corners of the galaxy. Was it a hoax? A trick? A possible trap? Or was it something real? Was it a call for help from another sentient species? For days, scientists and communication officers at the outpost worked tirelessly to trace the signal's source. They examined every possibility, trying to break through the cosmic noise and pinpoint where it had originated. Nothing made sense. The signal had traveled millions of light years and somehow arrived at the exact moment when humanity's technology was capable of receiving it. It was as if the universe itself had conspired to send a message that was meant for Earth, and Earth alone. It was at that moment that the Council on Earth made the decision. The signal had to be acknowledged. Humanity, in all its expansion and dominance, couldn't ignore a cry for help that reached so far across the stars. But there were many questions left unanswered. Who were these beings that called out for salvation? What kind of species were they? Were they trustworthy, or was this a sophisticated ruse meant to lure humanity into a trap? No one knew. Among those who debated the response was Dr. Merilyle, a leading scientist at the Earth Federation's Interstellar Relations Bureau. She stood before a large panel of officers and diplomats, her voice calm but filled with the weight of the decision. This is unlike anything we've ever encountered, but we have a duty to our species and to any life out there. We cannot turn our backs on those who reach out to us, even if we don't understand why. Her words resonated with many in the room, but the doubts and fears lingered. It was then that Commander Elliot Drake, a hardened military leader with years of experience, spoke up. "We don't even know if this is a legitimate request. It could be a trap, a way to draw us into a vulnerable position. What if they want to steal our resources or use us for their own gain?" His voice was filled with skepticism, but also with the harsh reality of space exploration. There were always risks. There were always dangers lurking in the dark void of the universe. Yet, despite the risks, humanity decided to respond. Earth wasn't just a planet of survivors. It was a beacon of hope, a species that had risen from the ashes of war and despair to become a force in the galaxy. Humanity had always believed in the value of life, of every life, no matter the distance, no matter the difference. So the decision was made. Humanity would respond. A message was crafted, not filled with threats or military might, but with a simple statement: "We are coming to help." The words were firm, but carried an air of uncertainty. The response was sent back into the void, the signal racing across the stars toward its unknown destination. But would the beings who had sent the message even be alive to hear it? Would they still be there when humanity arrived? The uncertainty weighed heavily on everyone involved, but the wheels of space exploration were already in motion. The crew of the Resolute, a state-of-the-art human vessel equipped for long-range travel, was assembled quickly. The crew was a mix of experts, scientists, engineers, medical officers, and diplomats, chosen for their ability to adapt and think on their feet. Captain Miranda Hayes, a seasoned officer with decades of experience, was selected to lead the mission. She stood at the helm, her face set in determination, but her eyes betrayed the same doubts that plagued everyone else. Was this the right choice? Could they really trust the unknown beings on the other side of this mysterious plea? As the ship prepared for launch, the enormity of what they were about to undertake began to sink in. A single message, one signal that could have easily been ignored, had set into motion a chain of events that would alter the course of history. But what awaited them on the other side of space? And would they be able to help whoever, or whatever, had sent the call for help? The engines of the Resolute hummed to life, and with a blast of force, the ship shot into the cold, vast emptiness of space. Time seemed to stretch as the crew moved further and further from Earth, leaving behind the safety of their home planet. The stars outside their windows were nothing more than distant, cold points of light. The unknown awaited them. Captain Hayes gazed out at the darkness, knowing that the path ahead was shrouded in mystery. She didn't know what they would find, or if they would even be able to save the people who had reached out. But one thing was certain: they had made a choice, and now there was no turning back. The cry for help had gone out across the stars, and humanity's answer was just beginning to unfold. What awaited them was as much a mystery as the beings that had called, and soon both the crew and the galaxy would learn that answering the call could change everything. And now, the true battle for their survival had begun. As the Resolute moved further into the depths of space, the crew of the human vessel remained on edge, unable to shake the sense of uncertainty that had settled over them. Days had passed since they left Earth behind, and each passing hour felt like an eternity. The silence of space was overwhelming, and the further they traveled, the more questions began to pile up. Where were they going? Who had sent the signal? And most importantly, what awaited them when they arrived? Captain Miranda Hayes sat in her quarters, reviewing the data they had gathered so far. The coordinates were still ambiguous. The signal, despite their best efforts, had been nearly impossible to trace with any precision. It had been scattered, bouncing off various space anomalies, making it appear as if it had originated from multiple locations at once. And the closer they got to the source, the more strange the readings became. "We're entering uncharted territory, Captain," Lieutenant Gregor Kim, the chief science officer, said, stepping into the room with a data tablet in hand. His face was lined with worry. "There's something strange about the signals we're picking up. It doesn't match any known space phenomena we've encountered before." Captain Hayes leaned forward, her hands clasped together. "What are you saying, Gregor? Are we talking about something like a black hole? A nebula?" "No," Kim replied, his voice low. "It's more like an energy field. It's as if something is distorting the space around us, creating a kind of veil. We're losing a lot of data, Captain. Whatever this is, it's not natural." Hayes frowned. "Could it be a trap?" "I'm not sure, Mom," Kim admitted. "But if it is, we'll need to be cautious. This could be something we've never seen before." The captain stood, glancing out the viewport at the vast emptiness of space. She had trained for moments like this, yet the unknown still unsettled her. She turned back to Kim. "Keep monitoring the readings. Let me know the moment you detect anything out of the ordinary." As Kim nodded and left her quarters, Captain Hayes felt the weight of the responsibility that had fallen on her shoulders. She had led many missions before, but nothing like this. Nothing that could change the course of humanity's future. Meanwhile, the crew of the Resolute tried to go about their daily routines, though the tension was palpable. There was a certain unease in the air, a quiet murmur that spread through the halls and mess rooms. Some of the crew were excited about what they might find: new allies, new technology, perhaps even the keys to understanding the mysteries of the universe. But others were more cautious, especially those who had experienced the dangers of deep space exploration. They knew too well how quickly things could go wrong when venturing into the unknown. For Lieutenant Alina Kruz, the ship's chief engineer, the uncertainty was a constant companion. She spent her days checking systems, ensuring that everything was functioning smoothly. But even the hum of the ship's engines seemed different, a bit off. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but something didn't feel right. "Kruz, do you have a moment?" A voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Lieutenant Nathaniel Grant, the ship's head of security. She looked up, slightly startled. "What's up, Grant?" "I need your expertise. There's something wrong with the sensors on the exterior of the ship. They're showing some odd energy readings. Nothing dangerous, but unusual." Kruz furrowed her brow. "Unusual how?" "Well," Grant said, hesitating, "it's like the ship's being surrounded by a strange field. It's not like anything we've seen before. And it's growing stronger the further we get." Kruz's eyes widened. She knew how vital the ship's sensors were. If something was affecting them, it could mean the difference between life and death. "I'll check the systems. We'll need to get this sorted out immediately." Grant nodded and left her to her work. Kruz turned to her console, fingers flying over the controls as she began diagnosing the issue. The readings were, indeed, unlike anything she'd seen before. It was almost as if something was cloaking the ship, hiding them from view, or maybe it was something more. As Kruz worked tirelessly, Captain Hayes was in her command center, reviewing a recent message from Earth. It was a communication from the High Command, Earth's top officials who were overseeing the mission. The message was brief, but its implications were clear. "Be cautious. There's a growing concern about the nature of the signal. New intel suggests the possibility of a hidden agenda. Proceed with caution." Hayes leaned back in her chair, a heavy sigh escaping her lips. The decision had been made. They had committed to responding to the call, and now there was no turning back. But could they trust this mysterious civilization? Could they trust anyone out here in the void? The message had been sent, and the wheels were in motion. The crew was approaching the unknown source of the distress call, but the deeper they went, the more the mysteries seemed to multiply. Meanwhile, as the Resolute drew closer to the alien planet, strange things began to happen. The crew started experiencing bizarre dreams, as if something was reaching out to them through the vastness of space. These weren't normal dreams. These were vivid, intense visions, almost like they were being pulled into the consciousness of another species. Some of the crew members thought it was the result of stress or exhaustion, but others weren't so sure. They whispered in the dark corners of the ship, speculating whether they were already being manipulated by the alien force they were about to encounter. The suspense was building, and Captain Hayes could feel it. They were closing in on the destination, and the pressure was mounting with each passing moment. She gathered her officers for one final briefing before their arrival. The questions that had been swirling around the crew now seemed to be coming to a head. "We're only a few hours from the destination," Hayes said, her voice firm but tinged with concern. "The signal is getting stronger, but we need to prepare ourselves for what's coming. This could change everything we know about life beyond Earth. We may find allies, or we may face a threat we can't comprehend. Whatever happens, we stick together. No matter what we encounter, we face it as one." The crew nodded in unison, though the uncertainty lingered. The unknown awaited them, and none of them knew what the next chapter of this mission would bring. Would the alien race they were about to meet be their salvation? Or would their attempt to help lead them all into a galactic nightmare? The answers were just ahead, hidden in the shadows of space, and soon they would find out. The tension aboard the Resolute had reached its peak as they neared the source of the mysterious distress signal. The crew was on edge, and with each passing hour, the questions continued to multiply. Were they walking into a trap? What kind of civilization had sent out such a desperate plea? And most unsettling of all, what awaited them on the planet that lay ahead? The answers were just beyond the horizon, and yet they remained cloaked in uncertainty. As the ship cut through the vast emptiness of space, the crew gathered in the command center. Captain Hayes stood at the helm, staring out at the view ahead. The swirling mass of a distant nebula bathed the space around them in an eerie glow, its colors shifting like liquid fire. The planet they were approaching had yet to reveal its true nature. Its surface was covered in thick clouds, and no direct scans had been able to penetrate deep enough to give them a clear understanding of what lay beneath. Yet they were close now, too close to turn back. "We're entering the atmosphere," Lieutenant Kim said, his voice tight with concentration, as he monitored the ship's progress. "The gravitational pull is strong. It's unlike anything we've seen before. Brace yourselves for turbulence." The ship shuddered as it entered the atmosphere, and the crew felt the first signs of the planet's intense gravity pulling at the vessel. The monitors flickered as they fought against the turbulence, but Captain Hayes remained calm. This was no ordinary mission, and if anything could challenge them, it would be this moment. She turned to her officers. "Keep your focus. We're almost there. Whatever happens, we stick together." The ship continued its descent, and the closer they got, the stranger the readings became. It was as though the planet itself was alive, breathing, almost as if it had its own heartbeat. The signal they had been following was no longer a simple plea. It had transformed. The frequency had shifted, and now it pulsed with an intensity that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. Suddenly, a bright flash illuminated the darkened command center, followed by an abrupt jolt that threw everyone forward. The ship's engines sputtered for a brief moment before stabilizing. On the view screen, the landscape of the planet began to take shape. Vast, jagged mountains rose like skeletal fingers from the surface, while vast oceans of glowing, iridescent liquid stretched out beneath them. And scattered across the land were strange, unnatural structures, their shapes unlike anything human technology had ever produced. "This doesn't look like any civilization we've ever encountered," Lieutenant Cruz, the ship's chief engineer, murmured under her breath. "What is this place?" Captain Hayes didn't respond immediately. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of the landscape before her. This wasn't the kind of world that seemed to need saving, at least not in any traditional sense. But the message had been clear. There was something here that required immediate action. The question was, what? The ship's descent slowed as the automated systems adjusted their landing approach. Soon, they were floating just above the surface, hovering over a vast city, or what appeared to be a city, though its architecture was entirely alien. There were towering spires that reached for the sky, constructed from materials that defied the laws of physics as the crew understood them. There were massive energy shields surrounding the structures, almost as if the city itself was alive and breathing in rhythm with the planet. The crew stared at the sight, transfixed by the bizarre beauty and chilling strangeness of what they were seeing. No one spoke for a moment, but their collective unease filled the room. "We're ready to land," Kim reported. "But Captain, the energy fields surrounding the city, they're interfering with our sensors. We can't get a full read on the environment." Captain Hayes nodded. "Prepare for a manual landing. We'll need to stay alert. Whatever's waiting for us down there, we're walking into the unknown." With a final hum, the Resolute touched down softly, its landing gear sinking into the strange soil of the alien world. The atmosphere outside was thick with a strange haze, and the air had an unnatural stillness to it. There was no wind, no sound, just silence. As the crew gathered their equipment, Captain Hayes couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though the planet seemed devoid of any life. The hatch opened with a hiss, and the crew stepped onto the surface, their boots sinking slightly into the soft, glowing ground. The air was thick, and there was a faint, almost imperceptible hum that seemed to vibrate through the bones of those who stood on the surface. It was unlike anything they had ever experienced. The planet felt ancient, alive in ways that were beyond human comprehension. "We're not alone," muttered Cruz, scanning the area with a portable device. Her face was pale, and her voice was filled with both awe and unease. "There's some kind of energy field surrounding us. It's getting stronger." Dr. Merilyle, the lead scientist, approached the captain, her eyes wide with curiosity and fear. "Captain, I don't know what we're walking into, but I have a theory. The signal we received, it wasn't just a call for help. I believe it's a distress signal sent out by a species that is now trapped. The planet itself is sending out signals, trying to communicate with us." "Trapped," Captain Hayes repeated, her mind trying to process the implications. "By what?" "I'm not sure yet," Dr. Lyle said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "But I think this planet, this entire system, might be in the middle of something catastrophic. It's like it's dying. Or something worse." Suddenly, a low rumble vibrated through the ground, and the sky above darkened. Lightning crackled, though there were no clouds. Instead, the air seemed to shimmer with strange energy, and a hum, similar to the one they had felt earlier, grew louder, reverberating through the air. "Get back to the ship," Captain Hayes shouted, her voice urgent. The crew hurried back toward the hatch, but as they turned, they saw something that froze them in place. High above, in the dark sky, a massive structure began to materialize. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, a giant, floating fortress, surrounded by pulsing energy shields, its shape distorted and alien. It seemed to be alive, shifting and changing before their eyes. The realization hit them like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just a distress signal. This was a warning that would change everything. "Get to the ship now." Hayes barked again, but as they moved, the ground beneath them began to tremble more violently. The hum grew louder, and the sky above the fortress cracked open, revealing something even more terrifying than they had imagined. Whatever force controlled this planet had just made its presence known, and it was not pleased to see them. The real mission was just beginning, and the crew of the Resolute had no idea what they were truly facing. Whatever lay ahead, they were about to find out, and the answers would come at a cost. As the crew of the Resolute rushed back to their ship, the atmosphere around them thickened with a palpable sense of dread. The once still air had transformed into a whirlwind of energy, crackling with raw power. The ground beneath their feet trembled with increasing intensity, and the sky above swirled with unnatural patterns of light. The fortress-like structure in the sky had not only materialized, but it now hovered ominously, its immense presence casting a shadow over the planet's surface. The crew knew that something was terribly wrong. "Move faster," Captain Hayes ordered, her voice sharp as she guided her crew back toward the ship. The urgency in her voice was matched only by the sound of distant thunder that rolled across the landscape, the noise distorted and unnatural. The crew was nearly at the ship when the ground beneath them cracked open with a deafening sound. A massive shockwave surged outward, sending them sprawling to the ground. The force was so intense that it seemed to warp the very fabric of reality, and the crew had to scramble to regain their footing, hearts racing as they struggled to push through the chaos. "Captain, we can't take much more of this," Lieutenant Kim shouted over the roaring winds. His voice was barely audible, but his panic was clear as the ship's hull shook violently. The interference from the strange energy fields had made communications with the Resolute almost impossible. Their systems were overloaded with data, and they had no idea what was happening. Captain Hayes' eyes widened as she saw the cause of the chaos. The floating fortress was now surrounded by a crackling storm of energy, some kind of barrier that distorted everything in its path. The lightning within the storm moved like living creatures, crackling across the atmosphere in unpredictable patterns. The ground was still shaking as if the planet itself was beginning to come apart at the seams. "There's no time to wait," Hayes shouted, her mind racing. "Get back inside the ship now." The crew sprinted the final stretch, their boots pounding the ground as they finally reached the safety of the Resolute. As the last crew member climbed aboard, the hatch sealed behind them with a hiss. Inside, the crew was breathless, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. "Status report," Captain Hayes barked, her voice steady despite the chaos that still gripped them. "We've got major damage to the external sensors," Cruz replied quickly, her hands flying across the control panels. "The energy fields are scrambling our systems. We can't get a full scan of the fortress, but something is coming through, something massive." Kim's eyes were glued to his console as the data continued to stream in, jumbled and incomprehensible. "The fortress. It's broadcasting something. A signal, like the one we picked up earlier, but it's different. More aggressive, more insistent." The room fell silent as everyone processed the words. The signal, now amplified by the energy storm surrounding the fortress, was not just a call for help. It was a command. It was as though the very fabric of the planet was forcing them to listen, to acknowledge its presence. The planet was alive, and it was reacting to their intrusion. "We need to get out of here," Cruz said, her voice urgent as she worked to repair the damaged systems. "If we stay any longer, we'll be trapped by whatever this is." But Captain Hayes didn't move. She stood still, her eyes focused on the swirling storm outside the viewport. The planet was no longer a place of hope or salvation. It was a warning. The signal they had received was not a cry for help, but a plea for release. Whatever had sent it out had been trapped for far too long, and now it was seeking freedom. "We can't leave yet," Hayes said slowly, her voice filled with conviction. "We've come too far to turn back now." Her decision was final. The crew would face the storm head-on, and they would find out the truth behind this alien world, no matter the cost. Without hesitation, Hayes ordered the crew to prepare for an assault on the floating fortress. The plan was simple. They would make their way to the heart of the storm and attempt to disable whatever force was controlling the energy fields. The goal was to bring an end to the chaos and stop the planet from consuming itself, and possibly them as well. "We're going to make it," Hayes said, her gaze unwavering. "Whatever we find, we face it together." The crew, though reluctant, trusted their captain. They had faced many challenges before, but none like this. With no other choice, they moved into action, assembling the necessary gear for their mission. As they donned their armor and prepped the weapons, the air around them seemed to hum with an unsettling vibration. It was as though the planet itself was watching them, waiting. The walls of the Resolute vibrated once again, and the strange, disembodied hum filled the ship. The signal was growing stronger, closer. Minutes later, they were aboard a shuttle, descending once again toward the surface, now fully enveloped in the storm. The lightning arced dangerously close to the shuttle, and the energy field intensified as they got closer to the fortress. It was almost as though the planet was pushing them away, unwilling to let them reach the center of the storm. The atmosphere crackled with tension, and Hayes could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her chest. As they neared the massive structure, it became clear that whatever power lay inside, it was far beyond human understanding. The fortress seemed to pulse with life, glowing with an eerie light as it floated in the air. The closer they got, the more the energy fields distorted their vision, making it difficult to see clearly. The shuttle landed just outside the fortress, and as the crew stepped out into the storm, they were immediately assaulted by a barrage of energy blasts. The ground around them shook violently, and the storm intensified, throwing lightning in all directions. But the crew pushed forward, their mission now clearer than ever. Inside the fortress, they would find the answers they sought. They would uncover the truth about the signal, the planet, and the terrifying force that had been unleashed. It was a race against time, a battle for survival, and the fate of not just humanity, but the entire galaxy now rested on their shoulders. With one final push, they entered the fortress. The walls of the alien structure loomed above them, dark and oppressive. The air inside was thick with energy, and the floor beneath their feet vibrated with the power of whatever force lay in wait. The answers were here. The cost, however, remained to be seen. The storm outside raged with intensity, but inside the fortress, it was silent. The crew braced themselves, ready for whatever awaited them in the heart of the unknown. They had come to answer a cry for help. What they would find in return, however, was a revelation that would change the universe forever.